Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? Always in the news because she's saying something stupid. Well, fear not, folks. This is not a story about Marjorie Taylor Greene saying something outrageous or trying to impeach Joe Biden or doing any kind of ridiculous thing. Nope, this is a story about good old-fashioned corruption, right? We love those. Here's what happened. According to a new report by the Daily Beast, according to Marjorie Taylor Greene's financial disclosure forms, her and her husband last fall invested anywhere between $250,000 and $500,000, they don't give an exact number, just the range, in Treasury bills. Innocuous enough, right? We're not talking about insider trading. We're not talking about, shady stock deals that weren't reported. She and her husband invested in Treasury bills, low yield Treasury bills, and she reported it. So why is that scandalous? Why is this corrupt? I'm so glad you asked that, Farron, because at the same time that she was investing in these T-bills, she was going out in the public and on social media before she got banned, encouraging a government shutdown, encouraging a default on the government's debt. And you know what happened while her and, of course, plenty of other Republicans were out there saying these things? It created uncertainty for investors, which made them less likely to invest in Treasury bills. And therefore, in order to entice more people to invest in these Treasury bills, the yield increased. And it was at that point when the yield increased, meaning you get more money for your investment, that is the point where Greene and her husband said, you know what, maybe it's time to sink a couple $100,000 into these very safe Treasury bills. Now, again, these are still low yield, okay? We're not talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene and her husband walking away with, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. That's not going to happen. But it's a safe investment. You're almost guaranteed this kind of a return. And by her going out there and publicly creating this controversy, creating this chaos surrounding the debt ceiling, the debt defaults, the government shutdown, all of that, investors pay very close attention to this. And if there is any sign at all that the government may shut down or even worse, default on the debt, they pull out of the treasuries, creating an environment where other people can scoop in and get those higher yields. Because shortly after all of this happened, the chaos went down, the government didn't shut down, we didn't default on the debt. That's wonderful. A debt deal was reached actually at that time to push it to December, which then, of course, got pushed even further down the road, which again, great. But once all that happened and they reached that first deal, the yield lowered. But Greene and her husband had already bought in for hundreds of thousands of dollars, locking in their guarantee. They won. They won while she was out there creating chaos. And I have to imagine that she knew full well what she was doing. Was she doing this specifically just to invest this money? Probably not. I think it's a stretch to make that comparison. But she did understand that her talking points could cause some fragility, I guess you would say, in the markets. And then when she noticed that was happening, she took advantage of it. Is it illegal? No. Should it be allowed? No. Just like the new legislation that's creeping out to ban members of Congress from trading stock, maybe time to look into this one too. Because Marjorie Taylor Greene may not actually somehow be as corrupt as those other people with the stocks. But I got to tell you, this story here, it smacks of corruption. She may not be getting as much money, but it's still something that Congress needs to consider if they're talking about banning these investments for Congress people who may have a vested interest in what's going on.